From Minneapolis, Minnesota, welcome to Playwrights Center's Theater Begins Here.
Today, theater begins when writers and actors collaborate. But first, a membership highlight. Are you looking to join a writers group? Member Open Play is a community-building opportunity for Playwrights Center members at all experience levels to support each other through script sharing and feedback. The center does not hire actors, directors, or dramaturgs for these informal feedback gatherings. Instead, it is a time for writers and other theater artists interested in playwriting to come together to read, share, and discuss each other's newest script pages. Each session is dedicated to one playwright member to have their full-length, one-act, or short plays read. Members must be active participants in script club for their script to be considered for the season. Attendance is open to anyone, but only members may have their plays read. When do we meet? Once a month on Mondays, 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. Central Time. Where do we meet? Virtually via Zoom. If you have any questions about joining Member Open Play this season, please contact Membership Programs Manager Alayna Jacqueline Barnes with any questions about this program. And now, on to the show. We are so excited to have Victoria Stewart with us today. Victoria Stewart has received the Francesca Premise Award, a McKnight Advancement Grant, the Helen Murrell Award, and the Jerome Fellowship, as well as residencies at UCross Sundance, Hedgebrook, Hermitage, Tofty Lake, Sewanee Writers Conference, and the Dunmar Warehouse. Her newest work, Vox, an audio play, was developed by Skylight Theater, and her plays include Rich Girl, performed at the Old Globe, Theater 502, George Street Playhouse, Cleveland Playhouse, and Lyric Stage. Her play Mercy Watson to the Rescue, performed at Olympia Family Theater, Magic Theater, Children's Theater Company, and Marin Theater Company. Other plays include Hardball, Fishers, Lost and Found, The Meaning of Maggie, Clandestino, Live Girls, 800 Words, The Transmigration of Philip K. Dick, Descent, and an adaptation of Henry James's The Bostonians. Her plays Rich Girl and Hardball have been published by Broadway Play Publishing. In TV and film, she's written for HBO, YouTube Red, and developed work with Fox, among others. She's a founding member of the Workhouse Collective, an affiliated writer with the Playwrights Center, and a member of WGA West and Honor Roll. Welcome, Victoria.
Thanks. I'm happy to be here.
So we love to start off asking guests, how did your theatrical journey begin?
So I was a very strange theater geek from a very early age. My parents, my mom really loved classical music, and there was always music around. I did dance, and I liked dancing, but really I was somebody who was like staging plays in my garage. I don't know where it came from. But I do have a very specific story that I want to share, and I think you'll know why when I get to the end. When I was, 5 or 6, my next door neighbor was this wonderful woman who is, my child is actually named after her. She's kind of like a grandma to me. And she said to my parents, my niece is coming with her family, and I want you guys would get along, and the kids are the right age. And so every summer her niece would come and we'd hang out. And we knew that her niece was a playwright. And we're like, oh yeah, but we weren't really theater people. And, it was before the internet, so you couldn't Google somebody. And so we always kind of heard about her. Oh, she's got a play in New York. Okay. And then when I was 13, this play was going to play in New York, and we went to see it. So we went all the way into New York, and we saw Painting Churches by Tina Howe. And it turned out that we've been hanging out with Tina Howe for years without really knowing that she was a super cool, very established playwright. And so seeing Painting Churches was like this huge theatrical moment in my life where suddenly I realized that theater could be a real life and that, and to see that play is about Tina Howe's mom, who was my next door neighbor's sister. And so to kind of see Marion sell this play, someone very similar to my next door neighbor, it was just a really huge kind of moment for me to kind of see theater, see my life reflected, and kind of know that there was real people who do this for a living and spend their lives doing it. And so, of course, I have to mention this because Tina Howe recently passed, and she was so important to so many people, and honestly to an entire generation of female playwrights. So I want to get that story in, because it was really important to me, but also because I wanted to honor her, because we all lost a mentor and a really great woman of the theater a couple of weeks ago. So
what an incredible story. And like a theatrical godmother to you. How incredible.
I know. I was really, really, really blessed. Surprised, just because it happened that way, she was sort of surprised when suddenly I was so into theater and then suddenly became a playwright. She was like, oh, okay. But she knew me as that kid who played with her daughter for years. So
that's amazing. How did you decide to pursue theater making as a career, and how did you know it was the path for you? I was strange and really liked theater from a really early age. I mean, I do remember, my mom always would send me to like YMCA camp. And there was a year that I sent away myself when I was 12 for like theater camp, and like, here, Mom, I want to go to theater camp. I don't want to go swim, I want to make plays. And really from 12 on, I was pretty devoted. After college, I did a lot of theater in college, mostly, directing, some lighting design, and then a lot of stage management. And so after college, I went straight into being an intern for the American Repertory Theater as a stage manager, and spent 10 years as a stage manager doing that professionally. It was a huge education just to see all those directors and see actors working at the kind of high caliber performances. And so I think that was, I knew by that point that that's what I wanted to do. But at that point I was like, oh, I want to be like a director or a producer, and it wasn't really until I was actually stage managing for Peter Sellers, this international tour of this crazy Chinese opera fusion. And I actually inherited, like $20,000 from my grandfather. And it was like, what do I want to keep on doing the stage management thing? No, I think I'm going to go be a playwright. And I started writing plays. And use that money to go to graduate school. And so that was this huge shift where I went from being just a theater maker to concentrating on my playwriting at that point. And that was, really important shift in terms of, what kind of theater maker I wanted to be.
Yeah, I love a stage manager.
When you're a good one, people love you because it's magic. It is a kind of magic, I think.
I'm a person that really loves learning other people's organization style.
Mm-hmm.
And a stage manager is always the best person to ask about that and share that with. I think even during the pandemic, well, I know that I was doing it, but people made videos of stage managers just making calls. And so you're in the show, but you're listening to the stage manager do all the calls. And I'm like, yes, this is really peaceful to me.
It's like your ASMR,
right.
Stand by.
ASMR. So today we're talking a lot about collaboration, specifically writers in collaboration with actors. But in general, especially being a former stage manager and seeing all different parts of how the production process works and even the development of the play, how would you define collaboration? What does it mean to you?
Well, I think the best collaborations are ones where everybody feels like they are working together to make the same thing. I think sometimes, when collaborations go wrong, I think is when people feel they
well, I have to put my stamp on it and it's not, or I have to be in complete control. I think the best collaborations are ones where it's porous and flexible and reactive. That doesn't mean, having spent some formative years at the ART, where it's like the home of Robert Wilson, where everything was very rigid. If you worked with that kind of director, I certainly know that the actors I knew who worked, for instance, with Robert Wilson, they had to sit down with him. This wonderful actor, Alvin Epstein, like sat down with him and was like, I have to find ways to work within your structure, because I can't just put my arm up on a 15-second thing and find any joy in it. How can I find joy within the structure? So I think the best collaborations are ones where you can have that conversation, where you can say, what do you need from me? What can I give you to make this moment work? I think working with actors is the best way for me to understand my play better. Like I only understand it once an actor brings what they bring to it. It's just voices in my head, and it's not real until I hear it for the first time. And so I think those are the ways we hear our work, hear the musicality of our work. You can hear it in your head, but it's not real until an actor speaks it.
How does collaboration show up to you in your work as a playwright? You just mentioned working with actors and hearing them speak the words. How else does collaboration show up for you?
Well, I think the best director relationships I've had have been where we really trust each other, and I feel like I can have a voice in the room and they feel like they have a voice. Everyone has some kind of a voice. And that doesn't mean I do believe, partially because I came from stage management, I do have a sense of hierarchy. And especially early on in a process, I'm usually someone who talks to the director and then lets them talk to the actors. And then usually over the course of the rehearsal process, I usually develop more of a relationship with the actors, but I try to give the director that hierarchy and that control early on. I think for me, the relationship or the collaboration, I just always think it has to go both ways. Like it can't just be me, oh, here's my play and you do what you want. It's got to be a thing where we're both in constant conversation.
So collaboration, obviously there's give and take in that process, like you were describing. How important is it to define those roles with other artists? And specifically talking about this relationship between writers and actors, what do you consider your role and what do you consider their role?
Well, I think, again, there are different processes, because I've worked as a writer where I have written an entire script and I put it in front of an actor and I have, I hear it in my head. And then when they say it, I often will change what I write because of their rhythms, because I do think that's important to hear, if I've gotten the rhythm, the musicality, and it doesn't quite work when it comes out of someone's mouth, I do refine it that way. But then I've also done a couple of devised pieces where, the actors are bringing a lot of, co-writing the text, and that's it's a completely different experience because they're generating material and you're kind of taking notes and then you're creating something from that generated material in a rehearsal process. So I think there are different roles, and you get used to what different roles are in each process. I think because I've spent so much time in rehearsal, I understand process, I think, a lot more than some playwrights, because I know sometimes that I can see the actor's going to get there. They're not there yet, but I can see that they're going to get there, and I'm going to give them the space to get there. Whereas, I've directed my husband's work, and sometimes I'm like, you have to leave. Because you're glowering and you're pissing off the actors, and you give us a couple days to get there, because they're not there yet. They're going to get there, but and because I've spent so much time sitting watching the small changes that an actor will make over the course of a rehearsal process, I'm very open to that long process, and I don't get super duper stressed. Oh, they don't have it the second day. I know I'm very aware of that long process. I think that's an important part of the process, is for them to internalize something as opposed to them, somehow it coming in from above and an instant understanding of the character. I love to watch the way an actor will build a performance rather than expecting it to be there at the first day.
How do you set up that environment or that working culture in the room that allows for the time that you're talking about, for healthy collaboration, for you were talking about a healthy environment in the workshop or in the rehearsal room? I think a lot of people go into a room assuming there's a healthy environment and not really knowing how to define it or what you have to do to create it. How do you set up that environment and create a healthy working collaborative space?
Personally, I feel like while I'm always very involved early on, I actually am fairly quiet the first couple days. Like, I'll people always ask at the first read through, do you have anything to say? And so you say the things you want to say. But for me, and this is not everybody, but for me, the first couple of rehearsals, I spend a lot of time listening. I really am interested in hearing what the actors are bringing in that moment, and also what the director's bringing and what the director, because that's, for me, that outside eye is what is an audience is the beginning of what an audience is going to get. So if an actor doesn't understand or a director doesn't understand, the audience isn't going to understand either. So I have to listen to what's happening and hear their reactions before I can I do obviously do tweaks really early on too, but I think to hear the arc, I have to actually just spend the first couple of days listening, and so I can hear where things are kind of breaking down or things aren't working yet. That's so for me, and I think that sets up a good sense of a healthy working relationship, because I'm not imposing my view on it, because I'm just listening a lot.
Do you have conversations with the director ahead of the rehearsal or the workshop where you talk about defining roles or assumptions that you might be coming into the room with?
Certainly, I've had conversations with directors where they are asking me questions and I'm answering questions. I mean, a really instructive moment, one of the first new plays I worked on as a stage manager was David Rabe was directing his own play, and it was this play, Those the River Keeps, which is sort of a weird prequel to Hurly Burly. It's like takes place in between Act 1 and Act 2 of Hurly Burly. And it was the first time an actor asked him a question very specifically about what their character meant by that. And he said, I don't know. Let me think about that. And it was like this huge brain explosion, like, oh my God, the playwright doesn't know. And it's because it's an exploration. And he absolutely saw the rehearsal as an exploration of his ideas and not as I'm this all-seeing God who understands everything. And so for me, that is an essential part of rehearsal. And so that beginning conversation with the director is, hey, we're both exploring this text at the same time. I mean, the time that I get in trouble sometimes with a director or don't get along with a director is when they're imposing too much of they're not entering into an exploratory phase. They already have come in with like, I have all these ideas and I'm going to put all these ideas out here and hopefully your ideas and my ideas are the same. If they're not, I'm going to mow you down. Those are the times I haven't gotten along with people. But the best relationships I've had have been, we're entering into this exploratory phase together with the actors. We're all exploring in that first week and trying to figure out this text together. Those are the best collaborations I've had.
How early do you bring in other collaborators to your process? Because I know sometimes, I'm sure it depends on what the project is, but sometimes it can be too scary to bring people in too early if your ideas aren't fairly fully formed. But I mean, it's called a play for a reason. You're playing in that process.
I personally love hearing my plays at a very raw stage. And that doesn't mean it's a final, I do love being in a reading situation where you bring in a scene to a writing group and you read it out loud, even if it's, most of my writing friends are actually pretty good actors. And so it's useful for me to hear it with. So I love hearing my play at a very raw stage. In terms of bringing in like an actor who you know is going to work on it, I mean, I wrote this play Descent, and when I had a first draft, I sent it to an actress that I had worked with on my play Live Girls, because I just was like, oh, she would be really good. Like she would bring something very specific that I see in this play. And, and so she's super smart and also a writer. And so she gave me notes, and, and so we had that conversation. So I'm always interested, especially if you have a good relationship with an actor or a director too, I love to get notes from people I know who were smart people. And I don't care whether they're directors or writers or actors, or, I love to get feedback. So I can usually be pretty early on. I'm interested in what people think early on.
That's a really great segue into our next question of, do you ever write roles for a specific actor in mind?
I haven't really done that. I mean, I'm starting to plot out something right now with that I'm considering writing, for two actors who they each played the same part in my play, Rich Girl. So one of them played it in New Jersey and one of them played it in California. And they have because they're playing the same part, they have kind of the same sort of gangly physical comedy. They actually look a lot like sisters. And so I was like, I should write a two-hander about sisters with these two people in mind. So I'm kind of doing that right now. I think, a lot of times I've written plays based on real people. So I kind of have somebody in mind that's a real person. And so then it's interesting to then see, the actor bring what they bring to it. But I haven't really done, besides some of the devised work, I haven't really done that yet in terms of like, I'm writing this for this person, there's so many actors I love. I would love to just keep on writing. I'd love to write plays for them, but it has to be the right thing, the right topic or whatever.
Do you do much work with other artists as you're writing the script, or do you primarily write sort of solo and then bring people into the process when you're ready to hear it or when you're ready to start developing it further?
I've done a little bit of both. So I have done some devised work. Fisher's Lost and Found, which was in my biography, I actually wrote with 4 writers, Corey Hinkle, Dominic Orlando, Deborah, and then me, and then 3 members of the moving company, Dominique Surrand, Nathan Keepers, and Stephen Epp. And we really, we just decided we wanted to work together. We just started throwing things around, and they're very generative. They're very, they really write on their feet in kind of an amazing way. And so a lot of it was, okay, here's the theme. We're doing this theme of memory, and the writers would bring work in, which frankly, the moving company people would like throw in the air and be like, we're not paying attention to your script, and then they would generate something from those ideas. But they really almost pushed against the idea of a script in rehearsal. And it was really, it was infuriating because you would have stayed up working, and then they literally would, those pages would be on the floor and they'd ignore them. But it was a great education. And it was funny, Corey Hinkle is my husband, and he actually is a very good generative artist and actually can act too. And so he would get up on his feet and generate with the best of them. Ended up having working on several productions with them. Whereas I think Deborah Stein and I were very carefully writing things in our notebooks. And she comes from she comes from Pig Iron, but she came from, devised work, but she was the writer. She was never, she never really acted. And so she and I were very like, that cranky writers in the corner. Whereas both Dominic and Corey both were like on their feet a lot acting. And it's just like what you felt comfortable with. I think we came up with something that we enjoyed, but it was interesting watching the struggle, because as writers, I think all 4 of us wanted to create an overarching story where all these characters oh, this character in scene 2 would come back in scene 4. And again, the moving company folks were really opposed to that. And we're like, nope, everyone's living in an abstract world, and these people aren't related. And we're like, oh, all right, and you're not gonna change Dominique Serran's mind. So we learned to just roll with it, and this is what we're doing. We just reacted to what was in the room as opposed to trying to getting in a fight. It would have made everyone miserable. So we just learned how to work within his structure.
That's awesome. So you kind of touched on this question a little bit about benefits of collaborating with actors and the challenges, just because there is a difference between kind of writing a little bit siloed and then stepping into a workshop with actors versus you're starting with them in a devised piece. So big question. In those separate situations, what are the benefits and the challenges to both those settings in collaborating with actors?
Yeah, I mean, the benefit to working siloed is often you're trying, for me, what I come from when I start to write is usually a place of curiosity. I have something very specific that I'm interested in exploring, usually, and often based around one character who I'm interested in trying to figure out who this person is. And and I am very research heavy, when I'm writing my own unique plays. When I've done work where the actors are more a part of it, I did another piece that was, it was supposed to be more devised than it was, but, we did a play called Clandestino but it was based on a historical event. So I was co-writing it with Corey Hinkle, my husband. It was also from an idea. Jeremy Wilhelm was the director, and it was his idea. And they also had music. And so David Wilhelm was writing the music. And it was about a huge workplace deportation that happened in 2008 in Iowa, because, I spent 4 years in Iowa, and Jeremy was from Iowa. And we had this idea that was going to be really devised. And so we were bringing in all these actors, and then it became very clear that because if we had really wanted to be devised and really brought the actors into the process, we should have given them a huge packet of research, because it is so specific to what was happening in Iowa and these issues of the Department of Homeland Security. And, half of it was in Spanish, and, there's a lot of stuff we were trying to accomplish. And so what happened was actually the actors were like, can you and Corey just go home and write the play? Like we're coming in and trying to devise these texts that are really complicated, because it's half of it's in Spanish, half of it's in English. We're talking about deportations, and the actors actually basically demanded that Corey and I go home and write something so that they had something to go with. And so it was an interesting process where we had this fantasy it was going to be devised. The actors were going to co-write it. And it, and in fact that, we had several Spanish speaking actors who, I don't speak Spanish. So Talís Saint-Esteban, or Rusi Saint-Esteban, and Pedro Bayón were like incredibly instrumental in terms of bringing that world. But I remember, really it was Pedro who was like, please go home and write the play. Like we can't improvise a deportation. We can't, it's just, we need these structures. So there again, different moments. I love writing a play on my own, but I also really love, I do have to have something if it's a play that's from my own idea. Like I do like having a full draft, and a lot of times it'll be a messy draft, but I do like having a full draft and kind of understanding what the play is before, if I think sometimes actors want structure, unless they're moving company people who all they want is to generate. Like there are certain actors who love doing it and who love generating, and there are certain actors who are like, please stop generating. Like I don't want to generate. I want some known things. And so I think it's a matter of getting. Reading the room and what's happening in the moment, rather than trying to impose, no, we're going to devise, even if no one in the room wants to devise,
That's a great segue into the next question around how do you know when it's the right time to bring actors into the process, and as you're describing, what that looks like?
It can be really interesting as I've grown more as a playwright. Sometimes you're in a process where you do bring people in too early, or I just early on at the Playwrights Center, you as a Jerome Fellow, you got this money to develop a play. And I had just come out of graduate school where I had this very flexible relationship with, I had actors I really loved working with, and I had that idea that I could bring in a mess. And I had a workshop of a very early draft of my play Hardball. And, I brought in actors, and one of the actors, frankly, kind of yelled at me a little bit about what a mess the play was. And it was a mess. I mean, he was right. It was absolutely a mess. He's not wrong. But I was sort of like, dude, it's my first draft. I was used to bringing in very early drafts with actors and just to hear it. It was literally just for me to hear it and understand it. And he was angry, maybe that his time had been wasted. I don't know, which is not actually true of most. There are so many actors that the Playwrights Center works with that, are dreams and completely understand process. And that's why I love Playwrights Center actors, so many of them that you work with. But it was sort of interesting to bring something in that messy and that early and get sort of people yelling at me about it. So because I actually really love hearing a mess. I really love, for me, I do like to write a first arc, and understand so I can start to do the work. So it was frustrating to have an actor not really understand what I was doing. Yeah. So I think sometimes maybe you're bringing in someone a little too early. I mean, luckily, in many ways it was good. I did a huge rewrite that maybe I would have done it anyway, even if he didn't yell at me. I love hearing it early. So that's kind of where I come from. I believe it's a really long process. I mean, sometimes I've had a reading of a play and I put it away for, a year, and then I pick it up afterwards, and probably still have those voices in my head, and they're helping me. But so I am a big believer in early, but it's not, not everybody likes that. Some people really want it to be in a crystal, they want to be ready in a very specific way before they hear it.
Yeah, I bet that is very individual. As somebody else might hear the mess and get the actor who's like, this is a mess, and feel like I can't do anything more because this was too early. So it's interesting to think about the answer to that question being sort of individual, when to bring the actor.
There's a lot of pressure if you have a reading. Yeah, I've just had some experiences where, sometimes I'll use a reading as a deadline to finish a draft just so that I can hear it. And sometimes then you have to deal with it not being really ready, or it's a public reading or something where people are, I don't understand what you're doing. And then you're like, you're in your head. And, I definitely have had that experience once or twice. So it is, you have to kind of figure out what works for you.
Yeah. Also, an interesting point that you're bringing up is that there are different types of actors. Like, frequently we think about straight play actors and musical theater actors. I mean, that's how it's divided up when you go to school. It's like your straight plays or musical theater. But a thing that people don't talk about enough, and obviously we do because it's what we do here, is workshop. Workshop actors are so vital. They're just so important because they deal with the mess. It's lovely to be the playwright in the room and to say, I have done this. I have vomited words on a page. Help me, please. But workshop actors really, they know how to dig through the mess. And when you come in and you're just like, this is my goal, is I want to just have clarity in this mess at the end of it. The workshop actors are usually just like, yeah, cool, got it. I understand the assignment. But for you, what makes a good workshop actor, and what kind of environment do they kind of help create with you?
I mean, I think that you mentioned the idea of play. I do think a really great workshop actor is someone who will make a strong choice. And I don't think I've had a bad experience where someone made a huge, strong choice. I think sometimes it is like you have to hear the times it hasn't worked in terms of like someone not being a workshop actor is where they treat it like a first read through, and you can see they're very confused, and you're hearing that confusion and that sort of waffling, and they're not making a choice. I mean, I think it helps if they've read through the play once, because sometimes I've had that happen where someone has not worked at the Playwright Center before and they haven't read the play before they show up, and they are like, I'm treating this like a first read through where you're going to have a really long process, but you don't have a really long process. You just have one day. I gotta hear it. And so you have, at the Playwright Center, you have a bunch of really wonderful actors who seem to read the play the night before, and then they come in with a very strong take, and then you can bounce off that strong take because they've made some choices, and you can go, well, that choice is really right. Oh, that choice didn't quite work, but at least you'll have something to listen to and to understand about your play. When you do have someone who has not really done workshops before and they're acting like they have 6 weeks of rehearsal, you're like, honey, we got half an hour, that could be less helpful. And honestly, this is why I think sometimes playwrights, even if they're maybe not great on their feet in a play, a lot of times they can have very strong takes when you're just in a circle of your playwriting friends. They often can hear the rhythm and make a strong choice while they're reading something. And you wouldn't necessarily cast them in the play, but you get a lot out of their take while you're just, reading it very quickly.
Well, this leads us to Alayna's favorite part of the podcast episode, where we ask where theater begins for you.
So I think theater begins when people come together to experience something together, as opposed to in different rooms. We've had a lot of people being separated in different rooms for the last few years. And I think theater begins when we come together to experience something together. And whether that's a play, whether it's a piece of art, whether that's going to a museum, I think that's where theater begins for me.
That's beautiful. And so true. Let's all get back to the theater.
Right. Let's be in the same space again,
Yes. Well, I really loved what you said, Tory, about the mess. And I think I'd like to say that theater begins with the mess.
Mm.
And I also really love this conversation about collaboration, because it just reminds me that, and what you just left us with, that this is a collaborative art, and gosh, what a healing, joyful thing it is for us to collaborate in this beautiful and important art making together.
I want to say theater begins by unknowingly meeting Tina Howe, but
well, it began for me, I guess.
But based on this conversation, I think theater begins when the voices in your head become real, by allowing actors the space to have the journey to build up that character. I really loved how you talked about that, is that actor does have to go through their own personal journey to get into this character, but also you get to watch the development of the voices that were haunting you in your head, and you were just trying to get that out on pages. So I love watching that journey for myself and for other people.
Yeah, me too.
Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. This is fun.
That was such a great conversation.
Thank you so much.
Join us for our next episode on November 29th. Let us know on Spotify where theater begins for you. And feel free to send your questions for future episodes to the link in the bio.
Thanks for listening to Playwright Center's Theater Begins Here.